Chapter 2. We were stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, a flat piece of real estate that threatened to burst into flames every afternoon from June through September. The colonel was the chief of staff, which meant for all intents and purposes, he ran the show. The colonel was born to run the show, and he had a drawer full of medals and ribbons to prove it. One of the medals was for saving another soldier's life out in the field. I used to sneak it from his top dresser drawer and turn it over in my hands, feeling the power of it like an electric pulse running up and down my fingers. It had always been my dream to shine in the colonel's eyes as brightly as one of those medals. My brother, TJ, had no problem in that regard. He was a varsity running back 3 years straight, made every football team he'd ever tried out for. The colonel loved football. It was number 3 on his list of things he loved the most. Number 1 was everybody in our family, my mother, TJ, and me, in that order. Number 2 was the United States Army, and number 3, hands down, no questions asked, was football. College football, professional football, a game of touch football in the backyard, it didn't matter to the colonel. More than once the colonel had told me that if I had been a boy, I would have been a star football player on any team you'd care to name. Well, maybe he didn't say it in those words, but that was what he meant every time he yelled, "Look at her arm! Watch that girl throw a spiral pass! You can't buy talent like that, no sir!" Some nights after dinner, we'd throw the ball around, the colonel still wearing his uniform, his everyday battle fatigues and shiny lace-up combat boots that didn't seem to slow him down a bit for all their heaviness. He'd toss me the football, turn and pound across the backyard grass. I'd cock my arm back for the pass and let the ball fly. It would spiral smoothly through the air for a few seconds before the colonel pulled it down with one hand, no problem, and tucked it under his arm. "Pathfinders!" he'd yell, zigzagging across the yard toward the imaginary end zone. "Combat ready, sir," I'd yell back, completing the old 8th Infantry Division call and response we'd learned as kids, which was part of our life, just like answering the phone, "Colonel Dexter's quarters," or making sure we had our military IDs with us whenever we went to the PX or the commissary, so we could prove who we were. Proud citizens of the United States Army. Hoo-ah, as we'd like to say. Hoo-ah, yes, sir. Even more than football, the colonel loved the Army. He loved starched and stiff uniforms and boots polished to a high shine. He was crazy about military parades and had dragged me and TJ to parade grounds from Fort Benning to Fort Ord. I'd even seen him get teary-eyed when troops passing in front of the inspection stand turned right face to salute whatever bigwig officer was sitting in the catbird seat. It got to him every time. "The Army way is the right way," he used to say to us whenever we piled into our blue Ford station wagon to start out for a new destination. Fort Hood, Fort Campbell, Fort Leavenworth. It was the pep talk he gave us in case we were feeling sad about moving again. It's about duty. It's about honor. It's about sacrifice. If you weren't an Army brat, that kind of talk would probably have you rolling your eyes. But we believed it. I believed it. It made me proud to hear the colonel say it. When he'd saved that soldier's life out in the field, in the middle of a combat exercises with artillery and tanks, he'd risked his own life, came a hair's width away from being killed. Sometimes at night in bed, I'd get cold and still all over thinking about that. How the colonel might be dead right now. But in the daylight, I wore his bravery like a badge of honor. TJ and I loved the Army so much, we'd spend most of our time as kids playing Army with our friends, planning out battle and strategies in deep, serious voices, setting up hundreds of little green Army guys out under the trees. I always played TJ's second in command, moving the green men around as he ordered, gathering sticks and acorns and whatever else he thought we might need in the heat of combat. One time, after a fierce battle against Bobby and Charles Kerner, those troops stubbornly refused to surrender for almost 2 hours. TJ unwrapped a piece of gum that he'd had in his jeans pocket and folded up the foil wrapper into a shiny triangle. He chewed the gum for a minute, then stuck it to the foil triangle, and stuck the triangle to my t-shirt. "What did you do that for?" I asked him, feeling the wet gob of gum through the fabric of my shirt. "It's a medal," TJ explained, "for courage under fire. I wore that medal for 2 weeks, until the gum lost its stick somewhere between the school playground and the second grade classroom." The colonel had been an Army brat too, and he loved telling the story of how the Army had lifted his father up from poverty to a good life. Papa Joe had been the fastest boy in his school, even with his shoes flopping apart, and one day he'd been spotted by an Army recruiter who told him he ought to sign up for the service the minute he turned 18. So that's just what Papa Joe did. With his first paycheck, he bought his mother a new dress, the first store-bought dress she'd ever had. Every once in a while, the Colonel pulled out the box of things he'd saved growing up, when he had traveled all over the place just like we did, from this post to that one. He showed us ticket stubs from train trips through Germany and Italy, and matchbooks he'd collected from restaurants in just about every American city you could think of. Kids, he'd say, leaning back on the couch, his arms spread out wide, I am a man of the world, full of knowledge and vision, a lover of international cuisine, an appreciator of fine art and good-looking women, and I have the United States Army to thank for this most excellent state of affairs. Oh, Tom, my mother would say, laughing, the music of it all high and bubbly. Then she'd roll her eyes, acting as though she were immune to the Colonel's charms. What you are is a man who likes the sound of his own voice. You love me, woman, the Colonel would bellow. Don't be afraid to admit it. And then he'd turn to me and TJ and say, all the ladies love me. They can't help it. And we'd blush and giggle, and I'd think that nobody in the world had a father as outstanding as the Colonel. I loved the Army, too, for making him exactly the way he was. You would have thought that the very idea of TJ enlisting would have sent the Colonel cartwheeling down Tank Destroyer Boulevard, Fort Hood's main drag. But when the announcement came, over a Sunday dinner in March, a couple of days after TJ's 18th birthday, he didn't say a word for a long time, just looked down at his plate like the medium-rare steak staring back at him was about to whisper the meaning of life. Aren't you going to say anything, sir? TJ finally asked when the Colonel's silence was starting to make us all feel nervous. It wasn't like him to shut up for any length of time. After another minute, the Colonel sighed. He's a big man, 6'4", standing around in his socks, and once upon a time, Point West defensive tackle, a regular bruiser. So it was funny to hear him sigh like a Sunday school teacher. He began tapping his finger against the table like he was keeping time to a song playing inside of his head. The point is, son, you're going to college in 6 months. He tapped slowly at first, then worked up to rat-a-tat-tat speed. The University of Georgia, class of 1973. Then medical school. If you want to enlist after that, I'll hand you the pen myself. TJ sawed at his T-bone in his slow, deliberate way. College is the coward's way out, sir. How can I go to college when the guys I played football with are fighting in Vietnam? Eddie McNeil's missing in action. The Colonel took a deep breath before he spoke again. I wondered if he was thinking about Eddie, who had been one of TJ's best friends when TJ was a junior and Eddie was a senior, and could do no wrong on the football field or any other place he decided to show up. He went straight from his graduation gown into an Army uniform, and a few weeks later shipped out to Vietnam. 2 weeks ago, the day after Valentine's Day, the principal had announced over the loudspeaker that Eddie was MIA. TJ had been pale as a ghost when I saw him get off the bus that afternoon, and when he told me why, I wanted to say something to him, but I didn't know what to say except, he's probably okay. TJ didn't reply. He just walked into the house and closed the door to his room behind him. You won't find Eddie when you're over there, son, the Colonel said. You can't put yourself on a one-man mission to go find your friend in the jungle. I eyeballed TJ, trying to figure out if Eddie McNeil was his real reason for enlisting, or if he was looking for any reason to go. We'd been playing war all our lives, and more than once TJ had said he'd like to get a real taste of combat, to see if he could handle it. Sometimes around 10th grade, when it became clear TJ was talented at science, the Colonel started pushing medical school on him, and slowly TJ had come around to the Colonel's point of view. But I would have bet money that part of him still wanted to test his mettle in battle. Now TJ said, I want to go to Vietnam because it's the right thing to do, sir. That's the only reason. I'll go to college when I get back. Up to this point, my mother had not said a word. This was her way. She liked to let everyone else talk first, to get what they had up their craw out of their system before she weighed in. But now she leaned forward, her eyes rimmed in red, and said, If you want to be a hero, then go to medical school. You can save hundreds of lives when the time comes. I've already signed the papers, TJ said. He tapped lightly against his salad plate with his fork, like he was underlining his point. I'm going to join the medical corps. It'll be a good experience. You've got time to change your mind, son, the Colonel said. It says so right there in the fine print. TJ stared him down. Do you really expect me to do that, sir? We'll talk about it in a few days, the Colonel said, cutting into his steak, when you've had more time to think about what you've done. You should go, TJ. I leaned over and grabbed his wrist, like I'd pull him all the way over there myself if I had to. I'd go to Vietnam in a minute if they let me. Besides, you don't know when we'll get another war. Oh, honey, my mother said, you don't know anything about war. You're just a little girl. I'm starting 8th grade in September, which is hardly a little girl. And I read Time magazine, I argued. I know plenty about war. That's enough, Jamie, the colonel said. But I thought deep down he had to be proud of me. And TJ, too. He'd raised us, after all. He'd raised us to believe in the Army way, and as far as I was concerned, he'd raised us right.